Good afternoon. It is the 11th Cultural Learning Community. Today's topic is individuals with disabilities and protections under Title VI and Title VII. Next slide, please. Today's agenda, we'll briefly go over introductions, the presentation, and we will take Q&A at the end. Next slide. I am one of your hosts for today, Moya Waters. I am one of the EEO specialists here at AmeriCorps, as well as one of the EO investigators. I'm also an Army veteran, so anybody out there who's a veteran, to all of you. Next slide.
And I am Michael Coakley, a colleague of Moya. I am also an EEO specialist, currently serving in the role of Acting Civil Rights Director.
Next slide. So before I begin into talking about history, I'm not going to read directly from the slides. I think that everybody is capable of doing that. And if you need help or have any questions to answer at the end, I will be gladly to do so. But I will begin from there. So Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So Title VI directly addresses denying certain persons any access to federal services, programs, or activities based on their race, color, or national origin. Next slide. What is federal financial assistance? Also, I'd like to say is AKA FAA. Federal financial assistance, think about money. Federal financial assistance is money provided through federal grants to an entity or an agency. So the agency I'd like to use is AmeriCorps because we're all here at AmeriCorps. So receiving FAA comes with conditions or requirements under Title VI discrimination laws. And so I just want you all to drop in the chat, what is FAA? Because I'm going to be using this term throughout the presentation. So let me just see you drop in the chat. What is FAA? All right, next slide. Okay, so I see for us, it's grant money, feds and financial assistance, AmeriCorps money. So basically it is money that AmeriCorps gets from the government. So we are the government entity that passes that down. But all right, what is a recipient? Think about a recipient as the receiver. AmeriCorps program office, such as AmeriCorps NCCC. So if you guys want to throw some hand claps in the chat, I like that. Show some pride, some love. So I also have AmeriCorps Vista programs, as well AmeriCorps Seniors, AmeriCorps State and National, and I think you kind of get to know the gist. But basically, these are the programs offices. They're considered as the recipient as it pertains to our agency, okay? And if a recipient distributes, provides, gives away, well, you know, nobody in the government gives away anything. FAA to other entities, they must monitor Title VI compliance. Absolutely, Teresa. So I see grants, Medicaid, et cetera. So those are also some great examples. Next slide for me, please. What is a beneficiary? So one of the things I like to think of a beneficiary as the person receiving the benefit. In our previous slide, we talked about the recipient or receiver FAA. And you all, what is FAA? I just need to know y'all are at least picking up what I'm putting down here. So what is FAA again? Because I think I forgot. I'm a millennial, so I like to use the short term. So I see money from the government. Yes, federal financial assistance. Okay, all right. So at least y'all getting something I'm putting down. Okay, so basically, in our previous slide, we talked about how the recipient or the receiver of FAA as it relates to our program offices. So basically, our program offices get money. So again, we have AmeriCorps NCCC, we have AmeriCorps Vista, we have AmeriCorps Seniors, AmeriCorps State and National. Again, you all get the gist. But the beneficiaries are the grantees that provide a service to the underserved communities. So again, they are the grantees that provide the service. So I just want you all to understand that. Next slide for me. So discrimination on the basis of. So Title VI, it strictly prohibits discrimination based on race, color, or national origin. And I'm just going to let y'all catch up. And programs or activities receiving FAA. And I know you see this beautiful red bubble. What about disability? So I'm going to kick it off to the next slide. Disability and discrimination in Title VI. Basically, Title VI does not specifically address protections for individuals with disabilities. So Title VI does not directly cover disability under its bubble. It only covers race, color, and national origin. So basically how it comes to play, the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and basically it prohibits discrimination and against individuals with disabilities in programs or activities receiving federal financial assistance. So basically, it kind of piggybacks off of Title VI. So next you have the Americans Disability Act, ADA of 1990, and basically it's just a broader scope of 504. And it's basically saying that it prohibits discrimination in public and private spaces, regardless of federal funding. And then, of course, you have the intersection of Title VI and disability. It does not cover disability, but a federal agency administering funds must ensure they are complying with the Title VI laws. Next slide. All right. And before I think I'm almost done out of here, but as for any process you're entering into, today, I do challenge you. I like to provide just history and overview of anything, because if you're going to enter in a process, I think it's important for you to understand what you're entering to. So take a moment and look at the slide. And I'm just going to provide you some quick things. So basically, Title VII, it promotes equal opportunity and it's shaping the workplace practices. So the difference between Title VI and Title VII, Title VI has to do with federal financial assistance, and Title VII has to do with discrimination practices within the workplace. Next slide. Disability discrimination and Title VII. You're all wondering, disability discrimination is not covered under Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act either? No, it's not. So unfortunately, again, in the previous slide, one of the previous slides, Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as the ADA, it protects the bases with individuals with disabilities. So it's basically saying it's illegal to discriminate in various places of public life, including employment, education, transportation, and access to public and private spaces. So that is how disability is tied into Title VI and Title VII. And disability discrimination works under the ADA when individuals are treated unfairly because of their disability or when they're denied a reasonable accommodation. And so I appreciate, and I'm going to pass this off to my co-presenter, Michael.
All right. Thank you, Moya. But before we move on, I see in the chat there's some issue with the ASL interpreter not being seen. I'm not sure how to make that happen. I'm not sure if the people who know how to make that happen have seen that, but there is in the chat some chatter about the ASL interpreter not being seen and a request to make that happen.
Michael, yes, we're having a technical issue with it at the moment. Give me 1 second and we'll start again.
Okay.
Dang, Michael, I would at least say smile if everybody doesn't look at you on camera.
I'm smiling. Thank you, Moya.
No problem.
Now, how am I supposed to follow you? I mean, that was awesome.
I mean, we just kind of pick each other up. That's how the type of relationship we have. You know what I mean?
So I guess, are we ready to proceed?
No, they're still working through the technical difficulties, I believe. believe.
Yes, just 1 second. Can we verify that we can see the ASL now?
Everybody, if you can see the ASL interpreter, please just give us a thumbs up, drop something in the chat for us so we're able to know that we can continue to move forward through our presentation. All right, I got a one. Yes, we do.
Interpretation.
Oh, they can see. Yay! They can see.
Okay,
All right.
great. Thank you,
All right,
chat, for letting
Michael,
us
it's all
know.
you, Mr. Decode.
All right. Again, thank you, Moya. That was an awesome presentation. So up until this point, she's given you background on the history of disability discrimination and what that looks like. I want to talk to you all for a moment about what is a disability and specifically what a hidden disability is. So an individual with a disability, as you see here, oh, next slide, please. I'm sorry. So, an individual with a disability is someone that has an ongoing physical challenge or mental challenge or impairment, one that substantially limits one or more major life activities. And when we talk about major life activities, we're talking about things like breathing and eating, walking and reading, hearing, seeing, things that fall into the category of caring for oneself or performing manual tasks. So again, the person has a physical or mental challenge or impairment, one that substantially limits a major life activity, and the person either has a record of such impairment or is regarded as having such an impairment. Next slide. So a person with a hidden disability similarly has a physical or mental impairment, but also there's a neurological component to that. They may have a neurological impairment. But the key here is their impairment is not visible to the naked eye. So we don't necessarily see that they have something going on. But their disability is one that can limit a daily activity or something as simple as their movements. It is estimated that upwards of 61 million adults in the US, according to the CDC, has a disability. And of the 61 million, 20% of those have a hidden disability. And we'll use the term hidden and invisible interchangeably. Next slide. So an individual with a hidden disability may appear to be perfectly healthy, but underneath the surface, they are suffering with a number of symptoms or challenges or limitations. So for example, you may encounter a person who, when you look at them, they may seem extremely tired all the time or fatigued. That person may, in fact, have depression, as drowsiness and fatigue are telltale symptoms of depression. Also, for a person who has recovered from COVID, there are certain telltale signs that still exist once the person has recovered, like, for instance, brain fog. So, on the surface, the person may seem perfectly normal, but in a situation in which you are engaging them in conversation, they may tend to forget some things. Brain fog is a symptom of COVID, again, a hidden disability. Next slide. So right here is, as you see, this is a list of common hidden or invisible disabilities. They range from hearing to visual difficulties to physical and psychosocial conditions such as depression and anxiety. And as you see in the image there, the symptoms vary, and oftentimes when you see people who exhibit some of these symptoms, they may look benign, and you may not even know that the person, because of their symptoms, is exhibiting signs that they are having that they have a disability, but in fact they do have a hidden disability. Next slide. Invisible or hidden disability come in two varieties. There's the physical and there's the mental. This is a list of common physical disabilities, and as you see there, um, everyone, I believe, knows an individual that has at least one of these conditions: cancer, a heart condition, a sleep disorder, or hearing loss. Again, these are telltale signs of a physical disability. Next slide. And these are mental conditions that people currently have. Interestingly enough, nearly half of those individuals who identify with having a hidden disability identify with having a mental condition. And of this list, can anyone guess or tell me what is the most common mental condition? Like Moya said, just drop it in the chat if you just guess. There you go. Depression. Of all of the mental conditions, major depression is by far the most common hidden disability that people currently have. Next slide.
Michael, I honestly thought you would have said PTSD because, not even with combat, you have all these traumatic experiences. So I'm actually shocked that it is major depressive order.
Well, as for someone like me who has depression, I would say depression is by far the most common. I know tons of people who have it, who don't necessarily want to let people know that they do have it, but it's something that PTSD on the list of of um, of the kinds of hidden disabilities, it ranks towards the top, but doesn't exceed depression. So I want to talk to you now about some of the legal implications of unseen disabilities within the Title VI and Title VII framework. Know this, that employers, whether they are in the private industry or in the federal government, employers must provide individuals with a disability with what we call a reasonable accommodation. A reasonable accommodation is a modification or adjustment to the job or the work environment or the way that things are currently done in the work environment or in the hiring process. The modifications enable the individual with a disability to have equal opportunity to perform their job the same way individuals who don't have a disability are given an opportunity to perform their job. The ADA requires reasonable accommodations as they relate to three different types of employment actions. One, in ensuring equal opportunity in the application process. Secondly, in enabling a qualified individual with a disability to perform the essential functions of their job. And third, in making it possible for an employee with a disability to enjoy the equal benefits and privileges of their employment. Next slide. So, along with the legal implications, there are some societal implications that go along with protecting or dealing with individuals who have been discriminated against because of their disability. The societal implications of the unseen disabilities is a significant challenge. people with hidden disabilities may experience discrimination and at a greater rate than individuals who don't have a disability. They may face or experience discrimination more than individuals in their workplace, and they are normally unwilling because they face discrimination within their workplace. They are unwilling to engage their colleagues. They're unwilling to um, engage their clients, and they're unwilling to ask for accommodations for fear that asking for an accommodation will open them up to more discrimination, unfortunately. Next slide. So at the intersection of disability rights and the anti-discrimination laws that Moya has previously discussed is the um, championing of justice and inclusion. Laws such as the ADA and the Rehab Act, which is the precursor to the ADA, have transformed the lives of many individuals within the country by providing them equal rights and equal opportunities. Next slide. So intersectionality, for those who don't know, intersectionality is a framework that explains how a person's various identities and overlap and address discrimination. The emphasis is on the interaction between one or more of the person's identities and discrimination. A person with a disability may experience unique challenges and discrimination based on their condition, with their identities being things like gender, age, sex, and race. So, in other words, a person who has who has a disability may, because of their other identities, race, sexual orientation, whatever, may also experience discrimination because of the disability.
Okay, so Michael, you're saying because I'm a Black woman and then because I'm hearing impaired, so having that like double, I don't want to say like a double standard, but like kind of like having from each category. I think that's a better word to say it.
Yeah, it's so in other words, a person who has a disability will oftentimes find that because of their disability, they are discriminated against not just because of their disability, but because of something else.
Okay, so again,
like
because I'm Black, right?
So it could be because of their race. It could be because of their gender. It could be because of their socioeconomic status.
So if I'm identifying it in this whole intersectionality, it's one of those things. Well, two actually, because of the disability itself, and then because of the other bases stated.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to understand. I want to make sure everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, as she just eloquently put it, you have two or more of your identities that are butting heads, and each in and of itself causes the person to be discriminated against. However, it's the other identity, not necessarily the disability, but the other identity that causes the person to be discriminated against. Next slide. So I want to just talk to you a little bit about the Rehab Act. As I mentioned a couple of slides ago, the Rehab Act is was the precursor to the ADA. It was the first federal law to prohibit discrimination against individuals with disabilities, and it served as the foundation for the ADA. So whereas the ADA addresses discrimination in the private sector, the Rehab Act it protects against discrimination in the federal workforce. And as you see here, some of the things that it addresses. It protects individuals with, disability, discrimination because of their disability. It requires reasonable accommodations to be afforded those individuals. It requires that the employer make appropriate steps, take appropriate steps to accommodate and to provide things like training to the individual. Next slide. So again, a feature of the Rehab Act is the call for a reasonable accommodation, call to provide reasonable accommodation. And as I mentioned, it is a requirement. Agencies are required to provide reasonable accommodations to both known and physical limitations the individual has, with one caveat: unless by doing so it causes an undue hardship on the agency. But take heart, case law shows that it is awfully difficult for an agency to prove an undue hardship. So by and large, there are very few cases in which an individual requests an accommodation and is denied an accommodation because of the undue hardship that it causes or poses to the agency. Next slide. So back to an earlier stat that I pointed out. I pointed out that 61 million individuals across the country has a disability. Of the 61 million, about 20% has a hidden disability. Within the workforce, 47% of those with a hidden disability refuses or chooses not to disclose that to their employer. That's a huge number. Next slide. So the question is, why do individuals with a hidden disability choose not to disclose to their employer, their managers, that they have a disability? Well, as you see here, there's a number of reasons. First, oftentimes people find that they encounter individuals who have a lack of understanding of what they're going through. And because of the lack of understanding, the people who have a disability, are often alienated or shunned or discriminated against. There's also, in some people's eyes, a negative stigma attached to disclosing that they have a disability. And people oftentimes they don't want to be stereotyped. They don't want to face any sort of backlash as a result of the fact that they disclose that they have a disability. And there's also the fact that by disclosing that they have a hidden disability, individuals often feel as if they're alienated by not only their boss, their managers, but by their colleagues, and so they are left out of things such as social events within the office. Oftentimes, they are often given tasks that are menial, or oftentimes they are forced to do things that they don't necessarily want to do, but are given those tasks because by the manager may feel as if by giving them this particular task, they are doing them a favor because of their disability. Next slide. Oh, I think that is it for me.
Oh, we made it through the hard part, right?
So, again, I kind of ran through that. There's a lot of material there. Do we have any questions?
So, Michael, I actually saw one in the chat. It is from Teresa Jewell. And I actually thought this was more appropriate for you to respond to.
Okay.
So it says, do you also run into someone who is LGBTQ being discriminated against by another one who is LGBTQ because they have some other factors such as race, gender, or religious belief?
Is it a possibility? Yes. Have I personally encountered that? No. However, um, at the crossroads of intersectionality, like we pointed out before, um, the person with a disability um, will, for various reasons, and it could be because of their sexual orientation, even though the person that's doing the discrimination is also LGBTQ, that doesn't matter because you can have same-sex discrimination, same gender discrimination, same sexual orientation discrimination. It doesn't matter, but what matters is what seems to be prevalent is the fact that the person is exhibiting something else other than the identity that people can identify with or see. So in this case, it's the disability that is the driving force behind the discrimination.
Okay, I see another one in the chat. It says, any resources for requesters when an agency is trying to say an RA is an undue hardship? What further steps can they take? So Emily, is it a possibility? Can you elaborate?
Well, I can give Emily a source that she could go to.
Okay.
The Job Action Network, JAN, is a rich resource for individuals looking to address employment issues, and it includes a rich section on reasonable accommodations. So outside of that as a source, every agency should have a disability program manager or a reasonable accommodation coordinator, something along those lines. That's an individual who the person should also get to know.
All right. And why is it FAA and not FFA? So you actually, that was a typo. So I'm glad that you were visual and caught me on that. So I will definitely be changing the presentation. I just think it was one of those oversight things. You're so used to seeing it, but it is federal financial assistance. So it is FFA. Thank you, Vicki. And then I have another question. Does the disability requiring a medical diagnosis to be considered covered by legal protections, or is it self-identification enough, such as for autism? So Mike, I'll let you answer that.
Okay, so the answer is I'll break this down. If the disability is apparent, then the medical documentation isn't really necessary. So you can think of any apparent disability, a person that is legally blind and can't see, or a person that has one limb. Um, if it's apparent, then obviously asking the individual to provide medical documentation to support the fact that they are saying that they're disabled doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If an individual has a hidden disability, one that isn't readily noticeable, then yeah, oftentimes depending on what it is that you are requesting, medical documentation is going to be required because you have to be able to support what it is that you are seeking by way of reasonable accommodations.
All right. And then the next question I have is, can you give us some examples of accommodations you've seen help people with disabilities in their employment? And so, Michael, I want to start with this, if that's okay. So something as simple as I had an individual who had PTSD, and he worked in a cubicle. And so it was something as simple as he would get startled very easily when people came up behind him. So he requested just to have a mirror hanging in his cubicle, just so individuals that would come up behind him, he would be able to see them coming. so he wouldn't get startled. So that's, that was a very small, something considered small as an accommodation that I've seen. Michael?
Okay, I just saw in the chat a question about some examples of accommodations for individuals with mental health conditions. It's the that's not easily answered, because what happens is once you've requested an accommodation, you the individual goes through what's called the interactive process. The interactive process is the process that entails the individual, along with the individual's managers, along with the disability program manager or reasonable accommodations coordinator, to sit down together to figure out, first of all, what are the essential functions of the job that the person has. And once they figure that out, then they can go and figure out what is the appropriate accommodation that fits that person's needs. So, um, so answering that, it's difficult to say exactly what are the types of accommodations, because it varies, and it varies because everyone is different. It is really a case by case situation. It could be something as simple as assistive software being placed on the person's computer, depending on what it is the person is requesting exactly, or something along those lines that would aid the individual during the course of their workday to help them perform the essential functions of their job.
Or make life easier, but like Michael said, you have to be able to do the essential functions. But like, I need little terms, Michael. I need to be able to. It makes life easier for me, so I can just be at work. You know what I mean? I have one last question. It says, I apologize if this was already discussed. Our experiences matches the stat that you shared that many employees do not disclose hidden disabilities to their employer. Do you have any suggestions for how a staff person should approach an employee who thinks they may benefit from an accommodation, but who hasn't disclosed a disability? So I have worked, I've had an incident where an individual had surgery. They were a park ranger. They didn't want to have an accommodation, but the manager was like, no, they need to have an accommodation. So one of the things I will say is the individual is the one requesting the accommodation. They have to want the accommodation. Now you don't necessarily have to say is, hey, are you requesting an accommodation? Even something as small as them saying is, hey, I need help. It's you have to recognize the clue words. What about you, Michael?
Well, the first thing that came to mind was respect. You have to, within the workforce, we're all to respect one another. And oftentimes what happens when people don't disclose is because, again, of that social stigma that we talked about. They are alienated. They are treated as less than, as if they can't do the job or whatever. Just respect the individual. And so the only thing I could tell the supervisor or whomever, if you recognize that the individual that's in your workforce is in need of an accommodation, approach them with respect. I'm sure that that will go a long way, as opposed to just telling the person, "Hey, you look like you blah blah blah. I'm going to get you an accommodation." You discuss it with the individual, and as Moya said, it's the individual that is requesting the accommodation.
But I think, Michael, we also forgot the main thing. We have to educate and inform them on the process as well. I think that's there, foremost, as well as being respectful. But in order for somebody to understand, educate them on the process. I think that would be like the first thing after the respect thing, of course. Hi, Michael.
Yeah, but also another piece of advice to supervisors: the fact that the individual has a disability, hidden or not, is as a private thing, and so it's incumbent upon the supervisor to keep close hold any information, medical information regarding that individual. So it's their job to not only do that, but within their work environment, any discussion that they happen to stumble upon from any subordinate that involves discussing the individual's disability or things related to the disability should be squashed immediately by the supervisor. And if an individual within the workforce comes to the supervisor asking any questions about an accommodation that may be given to the person with a disability, it's incumbent upon the supervisor to politely let the person know that it's really none of their business what has been given to any individual, and essentially just to keep the focus on them and not focus on someone else's situation.
So I think the awkward silence means we have no more questions.
Okay, is there another question?
Is there a site or a list of hidden disabilities, and is there a CFR that includes this? One of the things I will say, some of your fellow coworkers and just external individuals, they have posted Ask Jan. I've seen it in the conversation about 3 different times. I think that is one of the most helpful sites when it comes to individuals with disabilities. It helps not only the individual, it helps the organization understand how different accommodations can help with the essential functions of your job. Michael, do you have anything else to add on there?
No, I would just for the curious, any website that discusses in depth the Rehab Act or the ADA would also be a rich source for getting information about all things disability. Okay.
So I am dropping the ADA website in the chat. And you said what else, Michael? Because I'm also hard of hearing. So I actually wore a hearing aid today.
No, I was saying any website that discusses the Rehab Act or the ADA. I think I missed another. I saw a question come through, and I didn't see it in time. Do you currently have a job opening available?
Anthony already answered that. He led her to USA Jobs.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
So I think this concludes our question and Q&A portion. I don't know if is Lamar jumping on here or. Yes, there he is. Hi, Lamar.
Hey. Good afternoon, everyone. First, can I get a round of applause, some hearts, some fire, some hand claps, just show some love in the chat for Moya and Michael for all their hard work and just giving us a wonderful presentation. Please show them some love. Thank you all so much. Now, I want you to show yourself some love because as you have gone through 11 different cultural learning communities with the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility here at AmeriCorps. So you deserve some love. You deserve some applause for this because I know it has been a journey. And on this journey, we have learned so much and we are so thankful for you for going on it with us. And we are excited that in 2025, we are going to continue this journey as we continue to evolve in this space. So please please, please, please stay tuned for what the cultural learning communities will look like in 2025. And in the meantime, but in January, you can go to the AmeriCorps website and you will be able to find all the cultural learning communities and the recordings from this year of the calendar year of 2024 will be available to you on the AmeriCorps website. Again, we want to thank you for joining us. And if that's not enough for you, there's still biting at the chomps. We have the AmeriCorps podcast, Unheard Voices of Service. Please, you can look us up on Google. You can look us up on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube. We are available wherever you get your podcasts. Please look up Unheard Voices of Service, and you will get even more from AmeriCorps and learning more about culture, increasing our competency and understanding each other and building bridges across difference. So from the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility, we want to thank you so much for joining us and hope you have a great rest of your day and happy holidays.
Bye.